In these problems, we are solving some radical equations. And the general approach here is to get the radical part of it alone on one side and then square both sides and see if you can solve it from there. So, for example, this first one, I would add 2 to both sides. I would get square root of x minus 4 equals 7. And then I would go ahead and square the whole thing, and I would get x minus 4 on the left and 49 on the right. I would go ahead and add 4, and I would get x equals 53. One warning though, this may be a solution that works or it may not. Sometimes, because of the nature of the square root, you get some answers that don't work. So you want to take this and plug it back into your original equation. And if I do that, 53 minus 4 is 49. Take the square root of that, that's 7. 7 minus 2 is 5. That does indeed work. So that's definitely a solution to that problem. Let's look at the next one here. This one says the square root of x minus 6 plus 3 equals negative 6. So let's go ahead and apply the same procedure we did. We're going to get the square root part alone by subtracting 3. So we get square root of x minus 6 equals negative 9. Then we'll go ahead and square both sides. We'll get x minus 6 equals 81. And then add 6 to both sides. And we get x equals 87. Again, at this point, you're going to want to plug it back in and check. So up here, 87 minus 6 would be 81. The square root of that would be 9. So we'd have 9 plus 3 equals negative 6. And I think you can see that doesn't work. 12 does not equal negative 6. So this is an example of a solution that doesn't work. So don't give this as the answer. And actually, if you go back and look up here, after we subtract that a negative 3, we've got the square root of x minus 6 equals a negative 9. You have to have the result of a square root equaling a negative number. Well, that doesn't work with real numbers. You'd have to have an imaginary number in there. So we would probably say that this has no solution. Let's look at this next one. It's a little bit more complicated. What we've got here is 2 terms with radical signs on the left and a number on the right. And when you square this side with 2 terms, it's going to get more complicated because you have to FOIL it. So how do we do this? Obviously, if you're thinking ahead, you're going to end up still with some radical terms after you square it. The trick is you square it twice. It's a little bit more work, but let me show you how this goes. So when we square this side, when we FOIL it, we're going to get this term squared. We're going to get 2 times this term, and then we're going to get this term squared. So that comes out to x plus 10 plus 2 times square root of x plus 10 times square root of x plus x. You might want to verify that yourself by folding it out for yourself, but that's this side squared. So all we're doing is squaring here. And then, of course, over here we're going to have 25. Now, the next step, before we square this side again, we're going to get rid of anything that's not a radical, part of the radical expression. So we're going to subtract, well, we've got 2 x's and we've got 10, so we're going to subtract 2x and subtract 10. So that makes this side over here negative 2x plus 15. And over here we've just got our 2 times the square root of x plus 10 times square root of x. And now when we square this side, that's going to be a lot easier. So let's square the whole thing again. And this side would be 4 times x plus 10 times x. Much simpler. And this side, let's see, what do we get here? We get 4x squared plus, minus 60x plus 225, I think. And then we want to do our multiplying out here. If we combine these, we get 4 times x, that would be 4x squared. And then 4 times 10 times x, that would be plus 40x equals 4x squared minus 60x plus 225. Now we can do some simplification here. We've got a 4x squared on this side and a 4x squared on this side. So if you subtract 4x squared from both sides, those will disappear. That's kind of nice. And then I've got a negative 60x. I'm going to add that to both sides. And I come down to 100x equals 225. Divide by 100 to solve for x. And let's see. Actually, I think you can take a 25 out of the top and the bottom, and you would get 9/4. So x is 9/4 there. Now again, to double check, you want to plug that back in here. You can, and you'll find out that this does indeed work out to be a solution for this one. So that's the trick when you've got more than one term with a radical in it, is the double squaring. Let's look at one more. All right. So this one, we've got our radical part isolated on the left-hand side, so we can go ahead and square everything. So that would be x plus 7 over here. And over here, of course, we've got to FOIL this out. We would get x squared plus 10x plus 25. Now we can do a little bit of simplifying here. I would subtract x from both sides. I would subtract 7 from both sides. And I would get 0 over here, and then over here, x squared plus 9x plus 18. So now we've actually ended up with a quadratic. So what we're going to want to do is see if we can factor this. And can we? So x plus 6 and x plus 3, that's pretty easy. So we get our answers of x equals negative 6 and x equals negative 3. We do want to plug those back in and see. So let's plug in x equals negative 6. If I put in negative 6 up here, I get 1. So the square root of 1 is 1. And negative 6 plus 5 is negative 1. So that would say 1 equals negative 1. And that is not right. So this is not a solution. Let's try the negative 3. Negative 3 plus 7 is 4. Square root of 4 is 2. And then we have negative 3 plus 5. That's also 2. So that one works. So in this case, we came up with a quadratic. We got two solutions, but when we tested them, we found out only one of them worked. So that's a little bit of work with solving radical equations.